I've always prided myself on being observant, but what happened at that rental house still makes me question everything I thought I knew about ordinary suburban life. After my divorce finalized last spring, I needed a fresh start somewhere affordable. The Craigslist ad seemed too good to be true. A 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood for $800 below market rate. When I called, the landlord was almost desperate to get someone moved in. He mentioned the previous tenant had left suddenly, but assured me everything was perfect. I should have asked more questions. The first month was exactly what I needed. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and enough space to rebuild my life. I worked from home, spent evenings unpacking boxes, and slowly began to feel like myself again. The house felt normal, lived in but not haunted by someone else's presence. Then the visitors started coming. The first knock came at 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Through the peephole, I saw a man in his 40s wearing a wrinkled suit, shifting his weight impatiently. When I asked what he wanted through the door, his response chilled me. "I need to speak with Marcus Torres. We have unfinished business." I explained that Marcus no longer lived here. The man's laugh was dry, humorless. "Look, I know he's in there. Marcus owes my client $15,000, and we're not leaving until we get it." No amount of explaining convinced him. He circled the house twice, checking windows, before finally leaving. I called the landlord the next morning, but he just said some people take time to update their records. The second visit came 4 days later. 2 men this time, around 2 a.m., claiming Marcus had borrowed money for inventory. They knew details about the house that unnerved me. Which bedroom had the loose floorboard, that the basement door stuck, unless you lifted the handle. When I threatened to call police, one smiled and said, "Marcus probably told you we'd say that." I started researching Marcus Torres online. The trail was frustratingly thin. No social media profiles, no public records, beyond basic property searches. It was as if he'd existed just enough to sign a lease, then vanished. The most disturbing visit came on a Thursday night. I was working late when I heard keys jingling at the back door. My blood went cold. I'd had the locks changed when I moved in, or so I thought. The door opened, and a woman in her 50s walked into my kitchen like she owned the place. She seemed genuinely surprised to see me sitting at the table with my laptop. "Where's Marcus?" she asked, not threatened, just confused. "He doesn't live here anymore." "Who are you? How did you get in?" She held up a set of keys. "Marcus was storing something for me in the basement. A blue plastic container. I need it back." I stood up, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I don't know anything about that. You need to leave." Her laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Honey, Marcus made promises that come with this property. The arrangements don't just disappear because he's not answering his phone." She walked to the basement door, testing the handle. "I'll be back Friday night. Find my container, or we'll find it together." Before leaving, she placed a business card on my counter. Just a phone number, no name. "You have 1 week." I spent the next day frantically searching the basement. Behind old paint cans, I found scratches on the concrete floor where something heavy had been dragged. There were also newer marks, as if items had been moved recently. I called Marcus's former workplace. His supervisor said he'd stopped showing up 3 months ago. No notice, no forwarding information. The utility companies had no record of service transfers. His mail was being forwarded to an address that, when I drove by, turned out to be an empty lot. Marcus Torres hadn't just left suddenly. He'd disappeared entirely. The visitors became more frequent. Different people, always after midnight, all claiming Marcus owed them something. Money, favors, items stored in my house. They spoke about him with familiarity and frustration that suggested long-standing relationships I didn't want to understand. Last night, someone tried to break into the basement through the exterior entrance. I heard scraping metal and footsteps on the concrete stairs. When I turned on the outdoor lights, I saw 3 figures moving away from the house with practiced stealth. I'm writing this from a hotel room. Whatever Marcus Torres was involved in, his creditors have decided I'm a reasonable substitute for settling his debts. The woman with the keys called yesterday, and her message was simple. "The week's up. We're coming tonight." I've left the forwarding address blank on my lease termination. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some debts aren't worth inheriting. But I still think about that blue container, and what could be valuable enough to make people this persistent. Part of me wonders if Marcus Torres ever really existed at all, or if he was just a name designed to draw people like me into arrangements we never understood we were making. Some warnings sound too crazy to believe until it's too late to matter. There's something profoundly unsettling about realizing that the person you trust most, yourself, has been systematically deceived. I used to sleep soundly, confident that my apartment was a sanctuary, that locked doors meant privacy, that my elderly neighbor across the hall was nothing more than a harmless, quiet man. But over the course of 3 terrifying months, those assumptions crumbled. What I thought was paranoia became undeniable. What I thought was overthinking became reality. The human mind is good at protecting itself. When something feels wrong, but doesn't make sense, we create innocent explanations. We blame ourselves. A moved object becomes forgetfulness. An unlocked door is just distraction. A strange sound? Just the building settling. But eventually, there's too much to excuse. When I first moved into Riverside Apartments, I was relieved. I'd just gone through a bad breakup and needed a fresh start. The unit was on the 2nd floor, had great natural light, and came partially furnished, which was perfect. It felt like a safe, quiet place where I could begin again. Mr. Chen lived directly across the hall. He was in his 70s, always. Neat and polite, wearing pressed slacks and button-up shirts. His door was painted the same beige color as mine, but somehow, it always felt like his presence made the hallway colder. At first, I thought I was imagining it, how he always appeared the exact moment I got home. I'd unlock my door, and there he was, stepping into the hallway. "Good evening, Sarah," he'd say in his careful voice. "Working late again?" It felt strange. No matter what time I came home, he'd appear, sometimes within seconds. I tried changing my schedule to throw him off, but it never mattered. He was always there, always watching. 3 weeks in, I noticed my laptop had been slightly rotated on my kitchen table, just a few degrees. But I'm very particular about how I leave things. I checked the spare key under the fake plant outside, untouched. There was no forced entry, nothing missing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Then came the bedroom door. I always leave it shut when I leave, but twice in 1 week, I came home to find it slightly ajar. Same angle both times, like someone had opened it just enough to peek in. Little things kept happening. My toothbrush angled differently. My journal moved from the nightstand to the dresser. A coffee mug shifted a few inches. Prescription bottles rotated so their labels faced outward. The details were subtle, easy to dismiss, but they accumulated. My home no longer felt like mine. I started to lose sleep. The building made normal noises, sure, radiators, pipes, footsteps. But I began hearing something new. A soft, steady clicking sound inside the walls. Not pipes, not natural. Something deliberate, something mechanical. But the worst moment, the one that shattered everything, was the journal. Since the breakup, I'd been writing in it regularly. Raw thoughts, private fears, things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. One night I came home and found it in a different spot, slightly pulled from where I left it. My stomach dropped. I knew it had been touched. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I told Mr. Chen I had a double shift at the hospital and wouldn't be back until morning. I made sure he heard me leave. The door slammed. My footsteps echoed on the stairs. But I didn't leave. Instead, I parked around the block and snuck in through the back fire escape. I crept up the metal stairs and peeked through my own living room window. What I saw still haunts me. Mr. Chen was inside my apartment. He wore latex gloves. In one hand, he held a digital camera. In the other, my journal. He was photographing, each page carefully catching the light with the lamp. Not just the journal. He photographed everything. My bills, my pills, my fridge. And then, just as carefully, he placed each item exactly where it had been. He'd done this before, probably many times. The next morning, I knocked on his door, heart pounding. When he opened it, his expression was calm, like he'd expected me. "You were in my apartment," I said. He didn't flinch. "The landlord gave me access," he he said evenly. "I check on things, for safety. Previous tenants appreciated it." His tone made it worse, calm, like this was routine. I ran to Mrs. Patterson, the landlord. She was horrified. "I never gave him a key," she said. "He's lived here forever, but he's not staff. He's not allowed inside any units." When I asked about past tenants, she hesitated. "3 women broke their leases in your unit the past 2 years. They never said why. They just left suddenly." Everything made sense now. I moved out within the week. I lost my deposit, but I didn't care. I filed a report, but there was nothing they could charge him with. Photographing someone's belongings isn't illegal if he claims permission. Now, sometimes I drive past that building. Sometimes I see a light on in my old apartment and wonder if the new tenant has noticed anything. If she hears the clicking, if her journal moves, if she still feels safe. I hope she trusts her instincts before it's too late. I'm a night shift nurse at Metropolitan General, and for 2 years, I've relied on rideshare apps to get home safely after 12-hour shifts. But 3 weeks ago, something started happening that's made those late-night rides terrifying. It began with Kevin. At first, I thought it was coincidence when he picked me up for the second time. Mid-40s, clean car, polite conversation. But by the third ride, I noticed he always knew it was me before I got in, never asking my name. "Hey there, heading home from another long shift?" he'd say with that same smile. The 4th time Kevin picked me up, he was driving a completely different car. Same license plate numbers, just rearranged. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off, saying he drove for multiple companies. But it felt rehearsed. Kevin started showing up every 4th ride, always in different cars with those same plate digits. He began asking personal questions. Which floor I worked on, what patients I dealt with, how long I'd lived in my building. Something about how he absorbed every detail made my skin crawl. Then he started taking longer routes. Not drastically, longer, but enough that I'd notice more direct streets. When I'd point this out, he'd blame traffic, though I never saw evidence. 15-minute rides stretched to 25. 2 weeks ago, I reported him to the rideshare company. The representative returned with an answer that made my blood run cold. "Ma'am, we don't have any driver named Kevin in our system." I gave them the license plate digits. No match. No driver by that name, no vehicle with those numbers in any configuration. But I wasn't mistaken. I'd heard him answer phone calls. "This is Kevin," every time. Last week, Kevin started demonstrating impossible knowledge. He knew I'd switched from pediatrics to ICU. He mentioned the coffee shop I'd started visiting, though I'd never taken rideshare there. He commented on my new haircut before I'd gotten in the car, though I'd had it done hours earlier. The breaking point came 3 nights ago. I'd requested a ride to my sister's house across town, somewhere I'd never been with any rideshare driver. When Kevin's face appeared in the driver's seat, my hands shook. "Different destination tonight," he said, not checking his phone. Realized Kevin was controlling which rides he received from me. I tried canceling whenever his name appeared, but the app would freeze. Last night was the worst. I requested a ride home at 2:45 a.m. Kevin's name appeared immediately. My phone glitched, GPS showing my location as a warehouse district I'd never seen. Kevin pulled up before I could figure out what was happening. As I got in, he turned with that smile, but something was different in his eyes. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about your schedule, Tuesday through Thursday nights. You stop for coffee Wednesdays around 6 p.m., apartment 4B on Maple Street. Nice building, though that back entrance isn't as secure as you think. How do you know all that?" Kevin glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "I pay attention." He took a turn away from my apartment. "Your patient in room 314 asked about you specifically last Tuesday. Said you were the only nurse who really listened. I hadn't told anyone about that private conversation." "Let me out," I whispered. "We're almost there," Kevin replied, but we weren't headed anywhere I recognized. The door handle wouldn't budge. Child locks engaged. My phone showed no signal. Kevin hummed softly, drumming his fingers like this was perfectly normal. I don't remember how I got out. My next clear memory is standing in a diner, calling police. When they checked rideshare records, no ride had been requested that night. I'd never been in a vehicle at all. I haven't used rideshare since, I take the bus now. But sometimes I see cars slow down as they pass. Cars with familiar license plate numbers, just rearranged. The hospital installed new security cameras last week. They won't tell me why.